my name is Bridger Fates, and welcome to Master Stockman Consulting's educational video series on business power tools for agriculture. You know, in ag, we use a lot of tools, and we're used to using a lot of tools. It could be as simple a tool as this T-post, or maybe as useful a tool as this bell wagon. But today, we're really going to focus on business tools for agriculture. You know, whether you're raising chickens and maybe selling some eggs at the local farmer's market, or even selling produce from your garden, or you could be producing livestock, these tools will help you get you on the road to a profitable and sustainable ag business. We have 7 videos in this series that'll help you. The first video is basic farm and ranch economics. Then we have business tools for agriculture, then using the Wyoming Ranch Tools site. Then we have record keeping for ag. Then we have getting started in agriculture. And then we finish up with implementing the scientific process and implementing ag research. These videos are made possible through funding from Western SARE, and we appreciate their support. And in this first video, Wyatt Fates is going to talk to us about basic farm and ranch economics.
Thanks, Bridger, for that introduction. As Bridger said, my name is Wyatt Fates, and today I'll be talking about basic farm and ranch economics. Now, there's a few questions that we want to answer as we go throughout this video. Those are, what are the basic economics of farms and ranches? What size operations do they apply to? Why are they important to understand? And then, probably most important, how can you use them to your advantage? Now, at the heart of economics is this idea of supply and demand. And to kind of help us understand this principle and the rest of the principles throughout this video, we're going to use an example. That example being selling farm fresh eggs. So on the graph here on the right, we have on our vertical axis price, and then on the horizontal axis quantity. It's a little hard to see that down at the bottom there. And then we have these 2 lines here that crisscross. So this kind of green line with the S up here, that line represents supply, and then this other kind of orange line with the D, that represents demand. So basically what this is showing is, as you know, price is low. If we're looking at the green line as price is low, then you know there's probably not going to be a lot of supply, and that makes sense. So like with eggs, if you can't sell eggs for very much, you're probably not going to want to sell a lot of eggs. And then once price goes up, so if price is really high, well, then you're probably going to want to sell a lot of eggs because you can make a lot of money off of it. Whereas if we look at the demand line, it's kind of the opposite. If price is really high, then people aren't going to want to buy that many eggs. So the demand for eggs is going to be lower. Now, if the price of eggs is really low, then there's probably going to be people that buy a lot more eggs. So the demand for eggs as the price goes down is going, to get larger and larger. But what's kind of important for us is this place right here in the middle. And that is where the supply and the demand meet. And this is what's known as the equilibrium. Now, why is this important? Well, with any business, there's a few key things that we need to do. And one of them is setting the price of our products. So like with the farm fresh eggs, we're going to have to decide how much we want to sell the eggs for. And that could be, per single egg, probably more likely by the dozen. But we need to find the best price to sell those eggs at. And for us, that's going to be the equilibrium. That's where the quantity that we're willing to supply equals the quantity that is demanded at a certain price. That's also where we're going to make the most money. Now, it's kind of easy to see on this graph, where that is. If there were actual numbers here on the vertical axis where price is, we could see, hey, it's right at this price that we have the equilibrium. But in real life, that's not the case. We don't get to see that price. So, how do we kind of figure that price out? Well, we have a couple options. one probably good option would be to look around and see, are there other people with farm fresh egg stands that are selling farm fresh eggs, and how much are they selling them for? You could also go and look at like your local grocery stores and see if they're selling any farm fresh eggs and what price they set them at. Those prices are probably going to be a pretty good indication of where equilibrium's at. Now, maybe for your specific neighborhood, you know that more people want farm fresh eggs, so maybe you can sell them for a little bit higher. Or maybe the opposite is true. Maybe you know that in your area, the demand for them is just not that high. And in order to sell more eggs, you have to lower your price a little bit. But, we can kind of compare prices to other people that are selling the farm fresh eggs, and then, kind of get a feel for our area to really kind of get a good idea of where that equilibrium price is at. And, maybe you don't get it quite right the first time you set your price. Maybe you set it a little bit too low and you sell a lot of eggs, but you go, really I'd like to sell this many eggs, and I could make a little bit more money if I sold them for this much instead. So maybe you raise your prices a little bit. Or maybe you start off too high and you're not selling as many eggs as you'd like to sell, so you kind of lower your prices a little bit. And as you do that, you're going to get closer and closer to that equilibrium price. Now there's some other things that we can do to kind of change where the equilibrium is at. One of those things you might be familiar with is like marketing. Maybe you advertise on social media that you're selling farm fresh eggs to get, a greater demand for the eggs you're selling. Or maybe, you just talk to friends and family, and by word of mouth, they kind of spread that you're selling these eggs. And if you do a really good job with it, maybe they get more and more people to come, and so you can kind of raise where that demand line is at. So maybe instead of where it is right now, maybe the demand line comes up to here. And so now your equilibrium price is up here. So it is, higher than it was before. So there are things that you can do to kind of change where that equilibrium is at. But the key here is just to kind of find that price where you're going to make the most money for, the amount of eggs that you can sell. Now, once we've set kind of the price for, our eggs, we need to figure out, okay, how much money am I actually going to make from this? And to do that, we need to look at our profit and our losses. Now, to determine what our profit actually is, we need to know two things. One, what our revenue is, and then two, what our costs are. Now, revenue is just the total amount of money that you bring in. So that's going to be, how many eggs you sell times the price of your eggs. So, for example, if we sold 40 dozen eggs at $3 a dozen, then you're going to make $120. So that would just be your total revenue. But to figure out, okay, how much is my actual profit? If I take my revenue and I subtract the costs from that, how much money am I actually making? Now with costs, we have two different types of costs. There's going to be fixed costs and variable costs. Now our fixed costs are going to be things that don't really change if we produce more of an item. So if we produce more eggs, our fixed costs are going to stay about the same. So some examples of that could be, like a chicken coop. Maybe it holds enough that even if you buy more chickens, you don't need a new chicken coop, so that cost just kind of stays the same. Another possible fixed cost could be like a stand. Say you make a stand to sell your eggs at. Doesn't really matter how many more eggs you sell, you could use that same stand, so you have the cost of the stand, and that just kind of stays the same. Now, on top of our fixed costs, we're also going to have what's called variable costs. And variable costs are costs that are going to change depending on how much we produce. So the more eggs we make, the higher those costs are going to go. A couple examples of that could be chickens themselves. To make more eggs, you're going to need more chickens, so that cost could go up. Chickens are also going to, they're going to need food, So as you have more chickens, you're also going to need more feed, so your feed cost is going to increase. Maybe you decide you're going to put eggs in cartons for people. So the more eggs that you're, producing, the more of those cartons you need, and the more, the more your total cost is going to go up. Now we can kind of see on the right here, a graph of that as well, just kind of a visualization. You can see that your fixed costs down here, they're not really changing as your quantity goes up. As we move to the right on the graph, quantity is going up, but your fixed costs are just kind of staying right here at this same level. Whereas your variable costs, as quantity goes up, they're also going upwards. So we need to kind of, take that into account, where those variable costs are going to end up depending on how much we produce. And maybe our variable costs aren't a straight line. Maybe they start going up like this, So we kind of need to figure out where that's going to be and what's going to work best for our business. But once we have our fixed costs and our variable costs and our revenue, we can see what our actual profit is. So again, let's say that we did sell, those 40 dozen eggs. Let's say the fixed cost for all of that was $60 for our chicken coop and our stand. And then let's say for all of our variable costs, it averaged out to, we'll say $1 per dozen, and we sold 40 dozen eggs. So at that point, we'll say that was $40. So we have the $40 plus the $60. That's a total of $100 in costs. And then we made $120 from this, so we can take our profit of $120, subtract that cost of $100, and see that we made $20 from selling those eggs. Now, that's not a lot of money, but just as an example, you did make money from that business, so maybe you can scale up and make even more money. So how do we determine what those costs are? How do we look and see whether or not this is going to make sense? Well, we can use enterprise budgets to do that. So an enterprise budget is basically a budget for the specific product that you're going to produce. And it takes into account all these things that we just talked about: our total revenue, our fixed costs, and our variable costs. And it's based on 1 year of production, and then it allows you to evaluate your options and whether or not the product you're producing is viable. Does it make sense for us to sell these farm fresh eggs or not? And basically what this does is you're generally going to use it before you even start your business. Now, you don't have to. Maybe you just do it each year and kind of evaluate where you're at. But you generally want to do it before you start your business, and you kind of estimate, okay, what price am I going to sell my eggs at, and how many eggs do I think I can sell? So then you'll get, okay, this is the revenue that I should make. Then you're going to say, well, I'm going to, this is how much my chicken coop is going to cost me. This is how much my stand is going to cost me. So this is, my fixed cost alongside any other fixed costs you might have. And then we also need to list, out our variable costs. And you can list those in the budget as well. And, you can actually note them down and look at what your total cost should be. And you're generally going to do that on like a per unit basis. So you're going to see, okay, this is how much it's going to cost me to produce 1 dozen eggs. And then you can kind of look and see, okay, so if I produce, 10 dozen eggs, this is how much total it's going to cost me. If I produce even more, you can look at that too, or less. But this really gives you the option to compare and see, does this make sense? Am I going to make money off of this, or am I going to lose money off of this? Am I just going to break even? It gives you an idea and a kind of a plan for the business, and allows you to evaluate, okay, where can I save money? Can I use a different feed that's maybe a little bit cheaper? Is there somewhere else that I can buy chicken from? It allows you to evaluate these things. Now, enterprise budgets, kind of like the other principles that we've gone through so far, it doesn't just apply to farm fresh eggs. Really, these can apply to any size business, any size operation. The key here is, you just go through and you look at how much you kind of plan to make and try to list out all of the costs that you might have associated with that so that you have a good plan going forward. Now, there's some good examples of enterprise budgets that you can find available through Utah State University Extension. The link is here. You can also just Google it as well and find them, but they have different enterprise budgets. They don't have one for like a farm fresh egg, but they do have enterprise budgets for different crops, cattle operations, things like that, different size farms and ranches. So you can look at those as just examples of kind of what they have included in those enterprise budgets, what the different type of costs are. Maybe there's costs on there that you haven't even thought about. And you can kind of get an idea, okay, maybe you're planning on starting a similar business. It gives you kind of a base of where you can start for your costs and kind of to what you can expect to make. And it's just a good place to start for some examples. Now, we'll also provide a worksheet as part of this video where you can create basically a sample enterprise budget, enter in what you think maybe some of the costs are, and along with your revenue, just to get an idea of what an enterprise budget can look like, and just kind of get your mind working on what things might be in there. So circling back to our original questions, what are the basics, the basic economics of farms and ranches? Well, it's really your price, where the supply and demand is going to be, what price you can set. And then once you have that price, evaluating, is this going to make sense? And to do that, you're going to need, how much money are you actually going to make? And then what are your costs going to be? Now, what size operations do they apply to? Really, it's any size operation. It could be more or less complicated depending on the size, but it's going to apply to all sizes. And then why are these basics important to understand? Well, one, as we go throughout this video series, there's going to be other economic principles and stuff that are taught. Having just an understanding of these basics is going to help you understand those more as well. Just, hearing these terms and kind of understanding some of the terms that were in this video. And most importantly, how can you use them to your advantage? We've kind of talked about this a little bit, but it can really help you evaluate whether or not the business that you have or want to start is actually going to make you money. And it can get you thinking on, okay, what are ways that I can maybe change the business? How can I change my prices? How can I change my costs so that this business does make sense? I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to watch the other videos. That way you can continue to learn and just help in being successful in maybe a business you have now or a future business that you want to start.